you all made it in one piece. So that's wonderful. So we'll continue with our Bhagavad Gita classes, and today we're on text 14, and I ask Adhikesha to just read it out.
Second chapter.
Yes, second chapter.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. Text 14. Matra sparshastu konteya Shitosna sukadukada Agamapayano nityas Tam titiksa svavarata Matra sparshastu konteya Sitoshna sukadukada Agamapayano nityas Tam titiksa vabharata Matra sparshastu konteya Shitoshna sukadukada Agamapayano nityas Tam stitiksa svabharata
Matra sparshastu konteya Shitoshna sukadukada Agamapayano nityas Tam titiksa vabharata
Matra sparshastu kaunteya Shitoshna sukadukada Agamapayano anityas Tam titikshasva bharata Matra sparshastu kaunteya Shitoshna sukadukada Agamapayano nityas
Matra sparshastu konteya Sitoshna sukadukada Agamapayano nityas Titiksa vabharata Matra sparshastu konteya Sitoshna sukadukada Agamapayano nityas Tam stitiksa vabharata
Word for word. Matra sparsha, sensory perception. Two, only. Konteya, O son of Kunti. Sita, winter. Ushna, summer. Shuka, happiness. Dukha, and pain. Daha, giving. Agama, appearing. Apayana, disappearing. Anitya, non-permanent. Tan, all of them. Tiksasva, just trying to tolerate. Bharata, O descendant of the Bharata dynasty. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scale of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magha, January-February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas, and although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya, illusion. The two different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting.
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnav Shri Rupam Sagadam Saranam Sarvaitam Sarvakrutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Saharanam Shri Vishakam Krishna Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Srimati Paschasya Desarine Vancha Kalpataru Yasya Kripasindhuvesha Patitam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So welcome everybody again and Happy New Year to you all. Thanks for being with us today. So, yes, if all mobiles can be switched off, it will be good. So, we are on one of the most fundamental verses of this chapter, the second chapter. Thank you. Thanks. It's actually, this verse 2.14 is described as the mandate for tolerance. As you must have figured out, the theme of today's class is? Yes?
The weather?
Not the weather. The weather is part of it. It's tolerance. Prabhupada again is stressing this point. Tolerate, being able to tolerate, understanding tolerance. So we're going to explore this point very, as best we can. So this second chapter of the Gita, especially this part, Krishna is using a very interesting technique here, which is used in the Upanishads. It's an Upanishadic strategy. It's called Neti Neti. You heard of this, I'm sure. It's not this, it's not this, it's not that. So Krishna is starting right at the basics with Arjuna. Because it's at this point in this section, what we're studying now, it's called the Gyan section. It's the second part of the second chapter. This is the second part of it. The first part we just finished, which was Arjuna's indecision. And this indecision was the fifth argument that Arjuna gave. He gave 4 in the first chapter, which we discussed over the past month. CEDS, compassion, enjoyment, destruction of dynasty, and sin. Right? So those are 4 arguments he gave in the first chapter. And now in the second chapter, we started off with this 5th argument, which was indecision. Arjuna became frozen with indecision. He didn't know what to do, confused. And that went up till the 10th verse. And then from the 11th verse to the 30th verse is a whole section on itself. It's one of the most detailed explanations of the science of the soul ever given in any scriptural literature. This is the essence of what we use for preaching. When we go out to preach to people who have no idea of the soul, Prabhupada so many times, Nahanyate hanyamani sharire, soul is eternal. So many times we heard Prabhupada really stress this point. So that section is from 11 to 30, and we on 14 today. So we've been hearing how Krishna chastised Arjuna. You're a big pandit, Arjuna. Asochanam asochastam pragyam padam badam bhashase. You're speaking like a learned person, but like a big pandit, but you don't know what is eternal, what is temporary. In the 11th verse, then in the 12th verse, Krishna explains a little bit about the eternal nature of the soul. If you see the 12th verse, you can all look. The 12th verse. 11th verse, Krishna chastises him, so he takes command as the Guru. And then in the 12th verse, Krishna explains the eternal nature of the soul. None of these kings will die. You are eternal, I am eternal. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor do you, nor any of these kings, and never in the future will any of us cease to be the eternal nature of the soul. And then in yesterday's, or the 13th verse, famous verse, Dehino, Smrinyata Dehin, we see that Krishna explains the point of what is the Dehi. Who is this person? This thing which is eternal, which he spoke about in 12, in 13 he's explaining it. But there's something he added in there also. He gave this example of the changing body. Kaumaram, Yovanam, Jara, Tata Dihantara Prapti, Dhiras Tatta, Namuyate. One who is Dhira, sober person, he's not. So what is he telling Arjuna? Right now you're not sober. It's not because it's New Year's Day you're not sober. Anyway, in the West that would have been a joke. But it's because you don't understand the difference between the body and the soul. This is what I'm trying to explain to you, Arjuna. So he's going to great lengths to make this distinction that you are, because what is argued, now Arjuna made his claim, his arguments, right? So Krishna has to start answering. So from this point now, he's addressing Arjuna's first argument. And what is the first argument? Compassion. Compassion for the body. How can I kill? How can I kill my loved ones, my family people? So that argument is now being addressed here in this 14th verse. Krishna is explaining the eternal nature. He's explaining that there is something within this body called the Dehi, or the person. And that person is not changing like how? Like the body changes. Komanam, Yovanam, Jara. And more than that, he's explaining a subtle side of that. That one who is able to tolerate this or understand this, then he attains the higher level. So we in 14 here, if you turn to 15, you'll see that he's giving what is the goal of this. So in 13, he's saying this is your eternal nature. In 14, he's saying this is the process by which you can get it, to be tolerant. And in 15, he says what you will get? You will get the goal. What is that goal? Samamritam tvam tvaya kalpate. What is that? You will receive this eternal nature, which is in a liberated state. So just, you can see the sequence of the verses. Even the next verse in 16, it gives more detail. Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satam. That nature, what I'm telling you, Arjuna, it is eternal. For that which is eternal, there is no cessation, and for that which is temporary, there is no endurance. So he's explaining, so you see how Krishna is weaving it in slowly. All these wonderful verses, famous verses of the second chapter. Krishna is really, because Arjuna is making the big mistake, and he's clarifying that mistake. Philosophers call this confilating. Conflation means to mix an idea. What is the idea? To mix something or to confuse something. What is that? Arjuna is confusing the idea of the body to be the soul. So Krishna is really going through a step-by-step progression. He's saying, this is it. Do you understand this? We are eternal. First you're a fool, then do you understand our eternal nature? Then in 13 he's saying this is what it is, it's the dehi, it's the person. In today's verse he's saying, well, there's two sides of this, it's the internal and the external. And if you learn this art of tolerance, then what will you achieve? You will achieve amritam, you will achieve the highest level. And what is that level? Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satam. 16. So see how Krishna is progressively opening up this whole great knowledge of the science of the soul. And he's going to great depths to make sure that Arjuna understands this. And today's verse, like Mother Parvati was saying, is one of the only verses that you can use easily to talk about the weather. Right? Because it's the first thing when you meet somebody, oh, you know how cold it is? How's the weather there, you know? We easily talk about the weather, right? We quickly talk about the weather. So you can very easily talk about, this is the verse that Krishna talks about the weather. So what is he saying there then? He's explaining how, Prabhupada explains in the purport, how the extremities of weather. That in winter it's so cold that people still take their bath in the month of Marg. And in summer it's so hot that a housewife or a lady of the house, she still cooks. Although there's fire and it's so hot, she still cooks. So to be able to understand, to tolerate like this. So I did a little research also, because I thought you'd be interested to how many of you are feeling cold here? Yeah, everybody, right? What's the temperature outside? Any ideas? 11? Okay, say it's 11, right? And it is pretty cold, right? It is cold, 11. What do you think is the world record for the cold, for coldest inhabited place?
Minus
100 and something, whoa!
Minus 60.
Minus 60, close enough. There's a place in America, it's in California, called Death Valley. Anybody heard of it? Yeah, you have, huh? Death Valley is described, first we'll do the heat part, right? So we think Vrindavan gets hot, and it does get hot, right? But the hottest temperature ever recorded is in this place called Death Valley. It's 56.7 degrees Celsius. That's like every year seems to be, that's the temperature that comes there. Now there's another place in Iran called Abadan, and there's a climatic phenomena called heat bursts. That means although there's heat, it's hot, but all of a sudden the temperature just soars up. And then it stays like that for an hour or 2 hours, and then it dissipates after that. This phenomena, recorded in this place, Abadan in Iraq, recorded a temperature of 87 degrees Celsius. That's Sitoshana Sukha Dukkha Da, right? That's very hot. Now the other extreme, what would be the coldest? What do we get here? In Vrindavan, like we said, maybe 11 today. It goes,
48, 49, 48.
40, minus 48 you say, huh? Plus. No, cold?
Cold, minus 2 it was.
Vrindavan.
It was 2.
Okay,
Minus
2.
There's two listed.
Okay, but what do you think is the coldest place?
Antarctica.
Yes, Antarctica, very good. Antarctica is the recorded place.
Minus 80.
Minus 80.
No?
Yes, close enough. It says minus 89. Minus 89, I can't even imagine what that is, you know. Every morning I go down to get the gallons from the fridge. And above the fridge is the freezer part, and I just look at that ice there and I say, I wonder what's the temperature in this box. And it's probably minus 1, 0, minus 1, minus 2, you know, and that's freezing. Can you imagine what minus 89 must be like? I cannot. So if we think we're having extreme weathers, Krishna is saying, Tam statiksava bhavata, be tolerant of this. So it's interesting, there's always somebody who's having a more extreme experience than we are. And that's the nature of the world. It's in a change, state of flux, always changing. Nothing is ever fixed. It looks like it's fixed. That's the illusion of it. Just like anything, because like this table, you saw it last week. It looks the same, right? This cartels looks the same. The cup looks the same. You know, maybe even people over time, as you see people every day, you don't see that people change. But if you see somebody after a long time, then then you notice, right? There's a phenomenon in science called perseverance of vision. What this does is, if you see it's like video. A video is nothing but frames of pictures at high speed. It's the same phenomenon. Like somebody in a circus, you get somebody tossing around a firebrand. And if he does it at high speed, it looks like the fire is in a circle. It's one circle, but he's just spinning it at so high speed that it looks like that. So that's the nature of the material world. Krishna is saying also, Arjuna, it looks like it's not changing, but it's actually kaumanam yovanam jara. It's actually changing. And you see that in the bodies, in the change of the bodies. But somebody who's sober, he's not bewildered by this change. Now, having taken so much of time to explain that Krishna is telling Arjuna about the body, how does he start the first sentence of this verse? Matra sparsatu kaunteya. Now, that's like a paradox. Because he's saying, you're not the body, you're not the body, you're not the body. But then he says, oh, son of Kunti. You're the body, who are you? I'm the son of Kunti. Now what is Krishna trying to do here? Not only that, twice in this verse, Matra sparsa to Kunteyana sitoshana sukha dukkada agama apayano nityas tams tatikshava oh Bharata. Bharata and Kunteya, twice he uses this word. Now he's taking so much of time to explain you're not the body, and here he's saying you're from this great dynasty, Bharata, and you're the son of Kunti, which is both the bodily designations. So what is Krishna trying to do here? What he's trying to do is he's using honorific expression. He's saying, realize the great heritage that you come from. You're an Aryan. You're a Vedic Aryan, a Kshatriya, Vedic Kshatriya. And having such great heritage, you should know this knowledge. It's not, don't be like the verse we did in 2.2. Don't be aware of this impurities. Kutashva kashmalam vidam vishame samupastit. How come these impurities have come upon you? It's not befitting somebody who knows the science. Asvarga justam anarya justam asvargyam akriti karam Arjuna. Your fame, the one who knows this, is not somebody like you. You completely don't know this. So he's saying, remember your heritage here. That's why he's using that expression there. So firstly, he's trying to make Arjuna see this point. Now, In the verse itself, we say mantra sparsa. This is the first point that Krishna is stressing on. How do we lose our tolerance? Firstly, by externally. Like Krishna used the example of the weather, which is external, and then he uses the example of sukha dukkha, which is internal. So two aspects we lose tatiksapa, we lose tolerance in, or we lose balance in. One externally through weather, or through external phenomena, adi devik, and internally through like sukh, happiness and distress, adi atmik. So there's three calamities, three kleshas that disturb us: adi bhautik, adi devik, adi atmik. In this example, Krishna is using two. But what is he stressing here? He's trying to bring out this point. Understand that this is part of the nature of life. Therefore, it's essential. Therefore, note Krishna's tone here also. In the previous verse, he's explaining in 2:13, he has what is described as an educational tone. He's telling Arjuna, oh, this is how the body is. This is how one who's sober is. He's just teaching. He's just educating. But in today's verse, he's saying, Tam statikshala bharata. Be tolerant, Arjuna. It's almost like an instruction. It's like an instructive tone compared to the previous verse. And why is that? Because he wants to drive this point that until you develop this quality, you will not be able to transcend onto higher levels of consciousness. Very important for us as spiritual practitioners to get this point. And the first level of attack is matra sparsa, the senses and the object of the senses. They're always pulling us to such a degree that we don't have control over it. If we haven't developed this idea of control, they just pull us away so completely that even at times it will become fatal. We may have a mislap, we may even fall down. Yet we don't want to, we don't have the desire for that, but the pull is so strong that what happens? We may even fall over. Now I have a very practical example here, which I'm going to show you quickly. It's a 1-minute clip which demonstrates this point very, very vividly. Right? So I'll just set it up quickly.
he laboriously drills a hole in a giant ant-heap when he is sure a baboon is watching him because he knows baboons are incurably inquisitive. Next, he puts some wild melon seeds into the hole and works them in so that they drop into a hollow. Then he saunters off, knowing the baboon is burning with curiosity. The baboon doesn't trust that human being at all, so he plays it cool. But he's dying to know what gives in that confounded hole. Finally, Mr. Inquisitive can't take it any longer. He's got to know what's in there. He reaches in, grabs a fistful, and now his hand's too big to come out. If he had the sense to drop the seed, he could free his hand. Now he lets go when it's too late.
Right, I think you get the message, right? So, this monkey, the hunter knows that he's going to trap him. How is he going to trap him? By his curiosity. First he gives him, he sets the whole trap in front of him, and then he sees it, and then he starts to meditate on it. Dayato Vishaya Punsa.
Are you sure you want to shut down your computer now?
Yes, I'm sure. Thank you. So, Dayate Vishaya Punsa Sangaste Shubhajayate, Sanga Sanjayate Kama, Kama Krodha Vijayate. So first, he gives him an idea. He says, he knows the monkey is there, and he's busy with trying to set this thing up. And the monkey saw everything he did. And the curiosity is burning. What did he put in there? What is that in there? So, matra sparsa, the senses pull. And then when it pulls, we lose if we don't stop it at that level, control it at that level, it starts to develop. And then the emotions get involved, feelings get involved. I wonder what's that, I have to go and see it, So, and then it develops further. When that goes on, then intentions develop. I just have to go and see it. And then he starts to act on it. And at the stage of acting, it's very difficult then to control. That's why the worst thing you can do when somebody is angry, like this one, like this poster up here, to say, well, why didn't you control yourself at that time? Well, it's too late at that time. It's already reached the 4th and 5th level. But if one is absorbed, trying to develop this mood of tolerance, then it's not difficult that when he's provoked, because that's the greatness of a man, of a person. When they provoked and they understood. Now to reach that level, it's very difficult. It's what we all are striving for. And continually in life, you're going to get battles like this, where somebody's just shouting and screaming and, venting themselves on you. That may be one example, an external example. Then there may be your mind. Maybe the Vegas, Vacha Vegam, Manasakroda Vegam, Jiva Vegam. These are the internal pushings, the external pushings from the outside. So many, it's not a comfortable place. When we see the reality of life in this way, we realize it's not a comfortable place. And that's what Krishna is going to great lengths to tell Arjuna. Know these two aspects well. And what we have to learn is tamstatics, Bharata. Learn to tolerate that. That art of tolerance is a great art. It's one of the, if you see the characteristics given of a devotee, Tatikseva Karunika Surita Sarvadehana, Ajata Shatura Shanta, Sadvi Sadhubhushana. What's the first one? Tatikseva, tolerance. First one. Further in Lord Brahma's prayers also we see. Tatenu kampam. Tatenu kampam shushumikshamanu. Bhumjane vadma kritam vipakam. This tatenu kampam. Ridvik babu vir vidaram namaste. Jiva sumukti. Talayabak. That he inherits this world, the spiritual world. Same as 2:15. the next verse. This is the same idea. You will inherit the spiritual world. Why? How? Just one who patiently endures the hardships. Because take it as lessons. So it's not in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also, right? Shikshastikam, 3rd verse. What is it? Janarapi sunitena Teraravi sahishana manina manadena kirtanya sadahari. If one is able to be tolerant, more tolerant. The tree alone is tolerant, but more tolerant. So it's a great virtue that is being encouraged to be developed, and it's not something we can overlook. If we practice, or at least have the idea of this point, at least 80% of our spiritual life will depend on this point, because we as the soul are filtering the material world first through the subtle body, then through the gross body. So there's a double filtration that's coming through. It's the subtle body, then only matra sparsa to konteya, then only the external objects and the senses. And within that, so it's the 5 senses, and then the mind is on an inner level, then you get the soul. So we are outnumbered 6 to 1. 6 to 1 we are outnumbered. So it's not something of choice that we can you imagine somebody outnumbered 6 to 1, doesn't have spiritual strength and is trying to fight something which is directly the energy of the Lord. Maya Shakti. Impossible to win. But that's why Krishna is saying, take shelter, Arjuna, develop this level of, this quality of tolerance, and take shelter of me. Take shelter. We are the only way the jiva actually knows, because we don't know how to relate in the material world. None of this is natural to us. By nature, the soul is anatomically an entity of the higher dimension. The soul is anatomically an entity of a higher dimension, the spiritual world. So in this world we cannot just think that we are acting here and this is what is natural. So Krishna is saying, in order to act spiritually here, you have to have your consciousness reposed to that state. And if your consciousness is in that state, then you can even be in this state and not be disturbed. No sukha and dukkha, no sitoshna, this cold, hot and cold will not affect. Internally, that's externally. Internally, sukha and dukkha, which is the mind, sukha and dukkha, that will not disturb. Why? Because your consciousness is reposed on a higher level. So that is what Krishna is encouraging. Try to develop that. Now, what is usually, when we speak of happiness, it's New Year's today, right? So people would have had big feasts and lots of things, nice things to eat and drink. This is an idea of happiness which is well known in the West. It's a soft drink, right? And it says here, have you stocked up on happiness yet? So what a nice advert. So to say, well, if you haven't stocked up, you're not happy. This is a thing that's going to give you happiness. So this is the idea of advertising. The material nature is nothing but advertising. And more so in Kali Yuga, every angle you turn, there's some form of advertising that's there to distract us, right? So when we understand that this aspect of spirituality has to be developed, and how to develop that? By developing your consciousness on that level. Then when you end up in feuds or difficulties, both externally first, like this poster is saying, it's probably a common thing, either in family or amongst friends or amongst, even in a working arena, there's always somebody who's trying to dominate over us, or always trying to command over us, or that's just on the external level, Adi Bautik. Adi Atmik, the mind is giving us trouble with the urges, so there's always disturbances coming. Then on the Adi Devik, the weather patterns. Sitoshana, hot and cold. So there's always disturbances coming. But the only way to tangibly transcend that is developing tolerance. Therefore, this person, you must have read of him in Prabhupada's Journey to Self-Discovery book. He's a philosopher, Carl Jung. So Prabhupada countered his arguments there in the book, but he did say that this person has some idea of the nature of the soul. And he makes this point here. Everything that irritates us about others can actually lead us to understand something about ourselves. So if you just take a moment to reflect, that's why on the top of that poster that says there, don't react, respond. There's a difference between reacting and responding. What is the difference? In response, some intellection was used, some thought was used. But in reaction was what the monkey did there. He just saw it and he just became pulled by the urges to eat something or to see it or whatever it was. So, but responding means you use your intelligence there. This is why in the 5th chapter, Krishna very clearly explains the same point. Yehi samsparshana bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nate suramate buddha 521. He explains this point that the yehi samsparshana bhoga, samsparsha, this touch, again matra sparsha, when the senses touch the sense object, then dukkha yonaya evate, it just causes distress. It's a distressful situation. Luckily, our process is yukta vairagya, to use everything in the service of the Lord. So, but in dealing with devotees, in dealing with people, it's not always so easy. So we need a higher level of thought, a higher level of consciousness, and this is what this philosopher was saying. He's trying to use that what may irritate you about that person may actually teach you something very deep about yourself. If you just take the moment to learn it. Especially we always say, not a blade of grass moves without his will. So if this has occurred, then what is Krishna trying to teach me here? Because as we progress in the years, our learning goes from gross to subtle. To follow the 4 principles becomes easier. We don't even think about meat eating, intoxication, things like that, right? It's not something that's even there anymore. Yet when you made the choice to become a devotee, it was things that you thought about, right? And as the years go by, no. So now our purification is moving from external, from weather and these calamities, to internal, to dukh and sukh, internal purification. So it's going to need an internal, means a higher level of focus. So a higher level of tolerance. To tolerate heat and cold is not such a big thing. You can put a heater, or you can put an aircon, and automatically it adjusts things, right? That's external adjustment, which we are expert at, right? We're always adjusting the environment to suit us. But internal, what mechanism, what mechanical thing can you use to adjust yourself internally? Can you use anything? Is there any instrument that can teach you tolerance? But when these calamities come, when these disturbances come like this, then this is an opportunity. That is the mechanism. It's a subtle mechanism. And what Krishna is encouraging Arjuna, that unless you master this, unless you master this is the first verse of Nectar of Instruction. To master. This is one who, not necessarily one who's, the verse says to preach, one who masters this can preach all over the world, but by his own example also. And we see, as I quoted these few verses, these are qualities that Krishna is encouraging. This is the qualities we see of great devotees. Completely tolerant, so in these difficult situations, able to handle difficulties like this, unperturbed, undisturbed. This is greatness actually. Sobriety. Krishna says, Dhira tattva namoyate. One who is sober can actually, this is greatness. So then, having said this, how do we actually tolerate? What's the practical lesson of today's class then? How do we actually learn to tolerate? So the first lesson to understand that this tolerance is a really powerful tool. If we master it, it can help us transcend the spiritual. This is the practical aspect or the external aspect, and the internal is the chanting or our sadhana. This is the external aspect of the sadhana. The internal aspect of the inner purification of chanting. That gives us the connection. Tolerance paves the way. Devotional service moves us. Tolerance paves the way. Devotional service moves us across this. So both work hand in hand. If we get this down, we will be really moving on the speedway back to Krishna. So understand the importance of this point. Now, just in a few minutes, it's already almost 6. Let's look at the other scenario. If we have the difficulty where we've lost our stability, we've been intolerant in that situation, we lost tolerance, we became like this, became angry, or we lost, we broke one of the principles, or whatever the situation may be, where you've lost your ability to be stable, you lost your stability, your balance in your sadhana or your spiritual life, then what do you do? So if you find that in that situation, Krishna says in 1842, Sama, the qualities of a Brahmana, Sama, Dhamma, Tapa, Socham, Shantim, Ajavam, Evacha, Jnanam, Vijnanam, Astakyam, Brahma, Karma, Svabhavacha. So Krishna says that Sama means peaceful or tolerant. One can never be peaceful if he's not tolerant. Right? So in order to maintain, if you cannot maintain this Sama state, then Dhamma, sense control. If you're able to control your senses, you're able to become peaceful. If you've lost balance of both those stages, then Tapa, Sama, Dhamma, Tapa, Socham, then perform austerity. And what is the austerity for devotees? It's not fasting, it's not feasting, it's not doing great austerities underwater or holding your breath for a long time. It's focusing on Krishna, taking shelter. That's the austerity of a devotee. We don't do austerities to control ourselves for the sake of showing how strong we are. Because what happens in that? What's happening to our consciousness? We may be able to achieve that austerity, but have we achieved the consciousness of servant? Because then if you master the ability to do these things, what happens? Your consciousness becomes, oh, I can do this. You've lost the concept of shelter, of taking shelter. It has become that I have done this austerity, I have abilities to control myself. You're back in the center again, which is Dehinosmin Yatha Dehi. You're back in the bodily concept again. Therefore, we don't do, it's a very subtle point, but if you get it, we don't do austerities to master ourselves. We do austerities because it helps us at that moment to fully focus on Krishna. That's why we do austerities. Why do we do Ekadashi? Why do we do Chaturmas? Why do we do Kartik Vrat? Because in that 1 month we completely focused on Krishna. Undeviated, because we took a Vrat. And when we complete that Vrat, because of the duration of that time, habit continues. Therefore some aspect of what we did will rub off as a permanent state, whatever it may be. And that is why we do austerity. Because that aspect which will rub off in our day-to-day life continually after that, that is what we want. Because we did that for the purpose of shelter, not for the purpose of mastery. We never achieve mastery by becoming a master. We achieving mastery by becoming a servant. It's a very fundamental, this is what Krishna is also telling Arjuna here. Take shelter of me. If you take shelter, manmana bhavamat bhakto madhya jimam namaskaro mam evaisasi satyam pratijana priyo sime. You will become dear to me, not that you become a master. What is the greatness of becoming a master of material nature and you're still stuck here? But if you're a servant, if you have the mood of a servant, then no matter what calamities comes your way, you're able to always take shelter on the higher level of consciousness. That's tomorrow's verse. This is the goal of what we want to achieve. And 16 gives us the nature of that goal, how it is in that permanent state, because in the material state there's always going to be change. Everything in this material world is in a state of flux. So if you take shelter of any one of these things, you've not achieved anything permanent. You've achieved something, but it's temporary still, because it's still within this paradigm. But by taking shelter of Krishna, you're reaching and you're connecting with something higher. That's why this chapter, although it's Sankhya, it's giving the distinction between matter and spirit, or the soul and the body, but it's still yoga. It's Sankhya yoga. Why is it yoga? Because it's connecting to Krishna. It's teaching you this is the higher principle. So that's the glory of this verse. And just one little tip before we end. One practical tip, if the mind gives difficulty, right? If you can read it, it says here, when the past calls, let it go to voicemail. It has nothing new to say. So if ideas come up in the mind, let it, like the cell phone rings, just let it go to voicemail. Don't let it, yes, don't answer it. That's the nature, that's internal. That's sukha dukkha. So that's our greatest difficulty, especially where we are as sadhakas at the moment. How to handle the disturbances from inside, from the mind, from previous impressions. So when the past calls, just be patient. Utsaha nischaya dhairya tat tat karma pravartana. Just be patient. Enthusiasm with patience. When you're patient, it automatically releases. Just like a leech. You know what's a leech? It's a little bug. It's not it's a slug. What is it?
It's like a parasite.
It's a parasite, yes.
It's much closer, it's like a worm.
It's a worm, like a slug, right? And when it's thin, when it's small, it just comes onto your hand, you don't even feel it on your body. And then it has little suckers, and it starts to take your blood. And it grows and grows and grows. And if you try to pull it off, it will rip off your whole skin. You'll never be able to, you have to cut it off.
No, you put a matchstick on the back and then it lets go. Or you put a salt bag on the back and it lets go.
Really?
Yeah, some Tibetans showed me that once when I was trekking in Nepal.
Wow.
About 40 years ago.
You put a matchstick, huh? Okay.
A little salt on the back.
Salt, and then it releases. Okay. But the other way is to just be patient. And once it has its full, it's not going to empty your bloodstream out. Let it have its full, and then it'll automatically just release. Just like that, when the mind hits you with doses like spikes, like the Vrindavan current here, you know, the voltage just goes up. But it doesn't stay there, it drops again, right? It shoots up and then it drops again. So just like that, through the day, you have your peaceful moments, and then all of a sudden, where did that crazy thought come from? Just a spike. And then you say, well, let it go, just let it go, just let it go. And then as it dissipates, it'll, oh yeah, 10 minutes ago it was there, it's not here anymore. Another very effective technique, like they say, when somebody gets angry, say sit down and count to 10.
And what?
If you take a breath, sit down and count to 10. 1, 2, 3, like that. And automatically, because the breath is very connected, deeply connected with the breathing. Breathing is connected to the mind. That's why pranayama is so effective. So if you feel, you know, my mind is really, really hostile today, then just breathe in, breathe out, few times, or change your energy in your room or wherever you are. Just take a walk, go for a walk, come and take darshan. Just change the atmosphere and you'll see automatically the mind releases. And it's very effective in dealing with disturbances like that. Alright, so we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anybody has any questions?